Welcome back to the Winded Podcast. I am your host, Shamus Sullivan. No brothers today, so that means the views and the rankings and reviews and everything on this episode will be significantly lower than the episode I released last Friday. But that's okay. My brothers actually work and, are successful people in the workforce, so there's nobody to record with me on a Monday morning. But I have the time, I have the thoughts, so I'm here to talk about week one of the NFL and really anything else that may pop into my head over the next, 15 to 20 minutes. If you got the time, I appreciate it. Leading right into the most recent game, the late game last night, Sunday Night Football. Baltimore Ravens against the Buffalo Bills in what many could pick an AFC Championship game. I'm very high on the Buffalo Bills, as I said on the Brothers Parlay edition last week. I think Josh Allen's going to be the league MVP, and he showed why last night. I haven't checked the odds for MVP, but I'm sure he didn't fall at all. I'm sure he moved up the rankings if there was any movement on the odds, especially beating Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore's still a great team. I mean, lose by one in a last-minute field goal, but I think that bigger issues brought to the forefront for the Ravens. Not being able to hold on to a two-score lead, doesn't matter who you're playing. You're not going to be successful if you can't hold on to a lead like that and close out a team, even if it is the Buffalo Bills. Doesn't prove good, when the games get bigger and everything gets a little tighter and there's more eyeballs on you, but not a good first sign for the Baltimore Ravens. On the flip side, very impressive what the Bills were able to do in coming back. Josh Allen did his thing. He showed why he was the MVP, even though it was kind of controversial. And some people thought that it could have gone to Lamar, or some people thought it could have gone to Joe Burrow. But Josh Allen showed why he's the most valuable player in the NFL. And that's why I think he's going to repeat. And that's why I think the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl this year. Not overreacting after week one, just kind of using this to build the case that I've already presented, that I think the Bills end that long history of suffering and losing and finally hold up that Lombardi at the end of the season. But moving on to what I think is the next biggest storyline after Sunday football is Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh. Obviously had a disaster season last year in New York with the Jets, and even kind of didn't really finish that strong down the stretch in his time in Green Bay. Say what you want about Aaron Rodgers. The guy's tremendously talented, and it's been proven that the shelf life of a quarterback with the rules and everything and the way people take care of themselves now, that, a 40-year-old quarterback isn't a 40-year-old quarterback 10 years ago. And I think in the right situation, a guy like Aaron Rodgers with the talent he has and the knowledge he has for the game is going to continue to be successful. And I think that Pittsburgh made the right choice bringing him in. And it's kind of an interesting situation where, it was a quarterback swap. Justin Fields was with Pittsburgh last year. Aaron Rodgers was with the Jets last year. Schedule makers definitely knew what they were doing, putting that week one. Plenty of storylines there. But at the end of the day, it's Aaron Rodgers that gets his revenge. Jets looked good with Justin Fields, I would say. He had the rushing touchdowns, had the great throw to Garrett Wilson. But at the end of the day, it was Aaron Rodgers going back to MetLife and showing why he's Aaron Rodgers. And when he wants to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league, he definitely can be. Definitely don't think he was happy in New York last year, and he played like it. I also think if you watch the Jets games, the record wasn't great. Yeah, he threw a lot of interceptions, but they were in a lot of games. And that Aaron Rodgers that we saw yesterday, if we saw any of that in New York last year, I think that they have a better season, and people aren't talking about Aaron Rodgers the way that they are. But I think, whether you love him or hate him, Aaron Rodgers being good is good for the league. And, as a guy in his 30s growing up watching football, Aaron Rodgers is kind of the last guy, from that era that had Brady, Manning, Rivers, Breeze, all those guys. So to see one, the last guy hanging on, and, not that I want the Steelers to do well. I'm not really a Steelers fan at all, but I think it's good for the league when Aaron Rodgers is out there playing playing good, and Pittsburgh's another one of those franchises that, you want them you want them to matter. You don't necessarily want them to be good. You don't want them to win, but you want them to matter because the league is better when it's teams like Pittsburgh, Green Bay, Dallas. I know that, that's not a little biased, but teams like that, those, blue blood franchises in the NFL, you want them to be good or at least relevant. I mentioned the Green Bay Packers there. I also mentioned my Dallas Cowboys. So I'm going to transition into talking about Micah Parsons. I was unsure all week if he was going to play with the back that I called fake in the preseason, thinking that it was, over a contract, and they played it up a little bit, made it seem like he wasn't going to play, but there was no doubt he was going out there. He couldn't wait to throw on that number 1 Green Bay Packers jersey and get out there and show why he became the highest paid defensive player in NFL history. And for week 1, he definitely showed that. Kind of a surprise that Green Bay took it to the Lions as much as they did. The Lions were my NFC pick for the Super Bowl. And I know that NFC North division, I think, is the most competitive division in football. So I expected all games to be close between any of those matchups because, maybe Green Bay's better than the Lions or the Lions are better, but I expected it to be close. So for Green Bay to really go, in there and make a statement like that, shows why they went for Micah Parsons and went all in on this year. Because they've been close. They've been right there. Obviously, they dismantled my Dallas Cowboys a couple years and seem to be a couple years ahead of schedule. So now I think is the time for them to strike, while they have the talent. They have, Jordan Love coming in, a couple years under his belt, has the confidence, has some weapons, and they added some, the best defensive player, in my opinion, to the defensive side of the ball. So looks good for Green Bay. I still think that Dan Campbell's going to get that Lions team straightened out, and I think that they will be there in January and even February. I still, I'm not backing off that pick after 1 week. I'm not going to, overreact in one way or the other to 1 week of football. I will say, going back to Thursday, I am a Cowboys fan. Very happy with the effort and attitude that the Cowboys showed. Obviously, that doesn't get you into the playoffs, but I think they weren't expected to be hanging with the Eagles the way they did, especially after getting blown out twice last year by them in games that weren't even close. But they showed a lot of good things. They showed, that they're going to be stronger on the run. Part of that is because they don't have a guy like Micah Parsons anymore. As much as he is disruptive and gets to the quarterback and everything, was really irrelevant when it came to run defense. So getting a guy like that out, although I would have loved to have him, opens the door for them to be stronger against the run. And like I said, when you play Saquon Barkley twice a year, you want to be good against the run. And they did a good job holding him down. Obviously, you can't completely keep him off the stat sheet. And Jalen Hurts as well, one of the better run offenses, if not the best in all of the league. Seeing the Cowboys do well there. And the secondary, which had a lot of question marks, looked great as well. Shutting down A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, really keeping them under wraps and not letting either of them do really anything. A.J. Brown had 1 catch, 8 yards. And then Dallas Goedert got a bunch of garbage yards over the middle that didn't really amount to anything. So secondary looked good. I'm very happy with, not happy with a loss, but I'm happy with the potential that the Cowboys have. And they have another NFC matchup against the Giants this weekend. So I am looking forward to them applying what they did against the Eagles to a lesser team in the Giants, a younger team that's on the, trying to turn their franchise around. And I'm very excited to see what the Cowboys do against them on Sunday. Moving on to a hot button issue in the NFL. Obviously, if your team isn't on, or even if it is, most of the fans that I know love NFL Red Zone. Scott Hansen, electric host. Don't know how he does what he does. And seeing behind the scenes stuff makes it even more impressive. But, on the topic of NFL Red Zone, we had advertisement. No more 7 hours of commercial-free football. Doesn't exist anymore. We have ads now. Grateful that it lasted commercial-free as long as it did. I remember the first time he said last year when he didn't say commercial free football and they kind of sprinkled in some ads and thought that we wouldn't notice, but obviously that blew up Twitter and Reddit and everything, and everybody, thought the sky was falling. And I don't think it's falling yet, but I think that it's the first step towards NFL Red Zone being ruined. Doesn't help the fact that ESPN now owns it, and they have kind of ruined a lot of sports entertainment. As much as they've created it and built it up to what it is, they've kind of ruined a lot of good things. So the ads were not as invasive, I think, as people worried they would be. It's not like they're completely cutting to a commercial break and you're not missing, you're not missing action. You're just kind of getting a side box, which if they're going to do ads, that's the way I'd like them to do it. But my issue isn't necessarily with the style they're doing it now. It's more the slippery slope that becomes, that sure, they start with 4 15-second ads on a sidebar and don't interrupt the action. And thank God they're leaving the witching hour unadvertised. They're leaving that one, not touching it. So you're not going to be missing a huge, impactful play at the end of a game because they're showing an ad, which I think a lot of people were worried about. My issue isn't with the current setup. It's that what it could become. Those 15-second ads turn into 20-second ads. Those sidebars turn into cutaways from actual action and there's nothing on. If they can do it in a way that it's in kind of that filler where not much is going on. If they do it, when there's one game at the end of a half and it's all the other games are at commercial or halftime and they can cut away for a quick ad, do that. That's fine. I'm looking at other things at that point anyways. I'm on Twitter. I'm looking at my fantasy team. I'm doing other things. It's if they cut into actual action that people care about to show ads, that's when people are really going to start to get upset, me included. So I hope that this isn't just the beginning of the end for NFL Red Zone. I know that a lot of people are worried about that. So really just, I'm going to try to enjoy it while it's the product that it is before it gets any worse. But as long as they have Scott Hansen doing his thing, I'm going to watch. I don't care what the ads situation is. It's still the best sports product out, really, to just have nonstop action with an electric host like Scott Hansen. There's nothing that compares to that. And I don't care, if football's your favorite sport or not. There's no sport that does it better than that, as much as the NFL steps in it and shoots themselves in the foot. They always seem to come out on top. So hoping those ads don't become any more egregious or more invasive. Happy with where they are right now. If they're going to be ads, I'd like them to do it this way. Just a couple other quick points that I want to get to before I wrap it up. Daniel Jones. Who saw that coming? I mean, the Dallas Cowboys fan here saw Daniel Jones twice a year for however long he was there and, just never really turned into anything and, was really run out of town. I mean, giving him that contract extension instead of Saquon will haunt them for a long time, especially since he's not even there anymore. But found a home in Indy and looked great. I mean, 7 scoring drives, and couldn't believe that no quarterback who only had 7 drives had never scored on all 7 drives. NFL record, only person to ever do that, which is very impressive. And to be Daniel Jones is crazy. And another thing that's kind of a weird fact that seems like it's not even possible to go this long without a win on week 1, but first week 1 win for the Colts in 12 years. 13. Andrew Luck was the last Colts quarterback to win a week 1 matchup. So good for Daniel Jones. I like a second chance, a comeback story, and I'm not necessarily rooting for him or the Colts or anything, but I think it's great when when people find a new home and they can turn it around. So good for Daniel Jones. And speaking of Daniel Jones, where he came from, the Giants, had a little bit of controversy there with Malik Neighbors and Brian Daboll getting into it on the sidelines. And of course, with Twitter and everything being recorded and everybody having an opinion, people want to blow this up to be this big thing. Football is a testosterone-driven, adrenaline-pumping sport. Emotions get high. I mean, they're going to war out there. And they work so hard all for just a 3-hour game on Sunday. And to expect these guys to keep all their emotions completely intact is just unreasonable. I don't think it's anything bigger. I don't think it's going to be a bigger issue. And realistically, it's not really going to matter because I don't think the Giants are doing anything anyway. So, this blow up is probably already forgotten about. And, if they're having meetings or practice this morning, those two are not concerned about that. So people want to blow up anything they see like that. I remember the Travis Kelce, Andy Reid one a couple years ago. Brady always getting into it with his OCs, whether it's Bill O'Brien, Josh McDaniels. It's an emotional sport. People get upset. Really nothing more than that. Elephant in the room. Brothers Parlay. 1 out of 4 picks. Not great. Obviously not great. Very happy for Aiden. Aiden had a slow start last year. Took him a while to get his first hit on the parlay. So excited for him to see him, leading out of the gate with the 1 pick. But the brothers, we'll be back on Thursday night recording, and we will be putting out another parlay. Obviously, we took a lot of L's to start the year last year. It didn't stop us, and a week 1 loss is not going to stop us this year. Maybe we'll rethink the strategy. We kind of shot blind and did it live without any discussion. So maybe there'll be more behind the scenes discussion this week, trying to, really get that out, get a better card out that has a better chance of winning, but also has the high odds that pay out. We could all go out there and just pick the top 4 odds and, pick Saquon, Chase Brown, pick all these people that, are negative. We try to get a little creative. We look for the value. We want it to be better. We want it to, you're going to put your money down. We want a better payout. We're not necessarily looking to just stack W's of, small win parlays. We want to hit the big ones. So Brothers Parlay will be back. Apologize to anyone that followed us and was disappointed. But if you were with us last year, you know that it took us a while to get hot. And when we did, we cashed in big. And I expect that again this year. So yeah, make sure you get your texts, DMs to me, DMs to any of my brothers in, and make sure you leave voicemails. I mean, the voicemails have been a fun addition to the Winded Pod. And I hope we continue to get more. Tony and Warren, Rhode Island, was at his bachelor party over the weekend in the cute city of New Bedford. And I have 3 voicemails from him as he was crashing out, as the kids would say, over Florida Gators and college football in general, and did not have the best week. But congrats on the future wedding, Tony and Warren. Very happy for you and the future Mrs. Tony. But yeah, leave the voicemails. They're fun. Getting a lot of characters calling in. But call in and be yourself if you want. That number is 617-433-8481. The boys and I would love to hear from you. Or if you have a, non-sports related thing that you want me to discuss in one of my non-sports episodes, I like the topics. I've said that I have a weird brain. I like talking about different things. So send those texts and voicemails in. It's a separate line. It's not my personal line, and I will not be picking up any of the phone calls. I don't even get a notification until a message or voicemail is left. So don't be afraid to call and think I'm going to answer it. It's a separate line. So call away. I think that's all I have today. Monday Night Football tonight. Not really going to get into it too much. That NFC North matchup. Like I said, the most competitive, in my opinion, division in the NFL. So it should be a good one. My thoughts on Monday Night Football, I'm still just bummed that it's Joe Buck and Troy Aikman kind of wasting their talents on Monday Night Football. I think that they were better on the Fox broadcast. That 4:30 game of the week meant more when it was Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. Obviously, they have Tom Brady now, but I miss that old, they did a lot of Cowboys games. I always enjoyed listening to those two. I think, they're my favorite duo to listen to of the current, and I miss them on Sunday. The Sunday game of the week, but it is good to hear a familiar voice on Monday Night Football, because Monday Night Football, the product has just been so bad for so long. But yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, the socials, at Winded Pod, Instagram. I am Shamus P. Sullivan on Twitter, Shamus_Sullivan on TikTok. Make sure you're reading my articles and all the articles on Fan Feed Network. I will be appearing on the Fan Feed pod covering the Raiders this week on Sunday night, live streaming before Sunday Night Football. So if you're a Raiders fan, you want to hear what I have to say about the Raiders. Obviously, I'll talk a little Cowboys too and anything else that's going on. But make sure Fan Feed Network, Trey and the boys and the girls actually are putting out some great content, trying to build this thing up. So make sure you're checking out Fan Feed Network in your rotation of football coverage. But yeah, that's really all I got today, But yeah, just happy to hear from you. Thanks for supporting. And like I said earlier, I know the ratings on this one are not going to be as good because I don't have my three brothers with me, but fear not. Friday morning, we'll have the Brothers Parlay pick out, and me and the boys will discuss some other stuff. That's all I have for Monday. I've got some exciting guests coming up. Not sure when those episodes will be released, but have some decent guests and topics lined up. So the Winded podcast is off and running. But that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening/watching. Easy people. I don't know why I keep stuttering over that when it's supposed to be my catchphrase, but breathe easy, people, and we'll see you soon.